The first thing I heard was the snap of a twig under a paw that was far too large to be a wolf's. Sound, a sharp, wet crack of breaking wood, followed by a low, rumbling growl that vibrates through the forest floor. My own breath froze in my lungs, a sharp, cold knife in my chest. I was crouched behind a fallen spruce, the scent of damp earth and rotting pine needles thick in my nose. The air in the Blackwood Forest was alive with a tension that had nothing to do with the approaching storm. It was the silence of the prey. I was downwind. He shouldn't have known I was here, but he had stopped. He was listening. Elara. His voice was a graveled echo of the man I knew, layered with the beast beneath. It rolled through the trees, a command, not a call. Alpha Kieran, my mate, or what was left of him. I didn't move. My fingers, curled into the loam, were caked with cold mud. I could feel the frantic rabbit pulse of my own heart in my throat. 3 nights until the full moon, and his control was already fraying. I'd seen the gold bleed into his hazel eyes at dinner, seen the way his knuckles had whitened around his steak knife. He'd looked at me across the table, at the barely touched meal on my plate, and his upper lip had twitched. A silent snarl. That's when I'd run. "Come out, little mate." The words were a predatory purr now, closer. I could hear the soft, heavy compression of the forest floor under his weight. He was in his hybrid form, the terrifying, powerful shape halfway between man and wolf. 7 feet of corded muscle, claws that could shred oak, and a mind torn between reason and rage. "You know how this ends. You're only making it worse." He was right. I did know. Submission. A return to the opulent cage of the Alpha's house in the heart of the Nightfang Pack territory. More silent dinners. More empty days wandering the manicured grounds, feeling the pitying and scornful stares of the pack. More nights lying stiffly beside a man whose touch I once craved, now fearing the moment the moon's pull would become too strong, and the beast would turn its attention to the weakest member of the pack. Me, the human mate, the defective bond. Another step. The scent of him hit me, spiced amber, iron, and the sharp, electric smell of imminent change. My body, traitorously, still reacted. A flush of heat beneath my skin, a pull deep in my core. The mate bond, a ghost of a connection, a phantom limb that still ached. Sound, a low, rolling thunder in the distance. The wind picks up, rustling the canopy with a sound like rushing water. "I can smell your fear," Kieran murmured, his voice now directly on the other side of the massive log. "It's sweet, like ripe berries. It makes the wolf hungry." That did it. Fear galvanized into action. I bolted. I erupted from my hiding spot, legs pumping, my thin sweater snagging on a branch that ripped it with a sickening tear. I didn't look back. The forest became a blur of dark trunks and shadows. My breath sawed in and out, painfully loud in my ears. Behind me, a sound of pure frustration, a roar that was half man, half wolf, shook the air. Then the pursuit began in earnest. Sound, a thunderous crash as Kieran demolishes the fallen log, then the rapid, earth-shaking thump of heavy paws giving chase. He was faster, infinitely faster. The distance between us closed with terrifying speed. I could hear his panting, feel the heat of him at my back. I veered sharply left, towards the rushing sound of the Gorgon River. The icy water was my only chance. Werewolves hated cold water. It dulled their senses, hampered their movements. A clawed hand swiped at my shoulder, missing by inches, and shredded the bark of a young birch beside me. I screamed, a raw, ragged sound. "Enough, Elara!" Kieran bellowed, his voice losing its taunting edge, replaced by alpha authority. The tree line broke. The Gorgon River churned before me, wide and black, flecked with white foam from the storm-swollen current. Without hesitation, I plunged in. Sound, a shocking, massive splash as Elara hits the water, followed by the immediate rush of turbulent current and her gasp of shock. The cold was an absolute, mind-numbing agony. It stole my breath, seized my muscles. The current grabbed me like a giant hand and yanked me off my feet. I flailed, choking on icy water, fighting to keep my head above the surface. I glimpsed the bank. Kieran stood at the edge, fully transformed into his hybrid horror. His clothes were in tatters, his body a masterpiece of terrifying power. Moonlight glinted off his golden eyes, fixed on me. He took a step towards the water, then snarled, recoiling as the spray touched his furred legs. The curse of the wolf, a predator's aversion to the numbing flow. "You foolish girl," he roared over the water's din. "The river will kill you." "Better than you," I screamed back, the words ripped away by the current. His rage was a tangible force. He paced the bank like a caged animal, his growls echoing off the water. I was losing feeling in my limbs, the cold leaching the strength from my body. The current was dragging me downstream, away from him, towards the jagged rocks I could hear roaring ahead. Just as my head dipped below the surface again, my vision darkening at the edges, I saw him. Not Kieran. Another figure, standing still and silent in the shadows of the pines farther down the bank. Tall, broad-shouldered, just watching. A glint of silver at his throat, a pendant, a knife. Lightning flashed, illuminating the scene for a split second. It was Ronan, Kieran's beta, the pack's enforcer. His face was an unreadable mask, his eyes reflecting the lightning not with gold, but with a cool, steady gray. He made no move to help. He made no move to hinder. He simply observed. Then the rapids took me. Sound. The river roar rises to a crescendo, water crashing over rocks. Then a sudden, dull thud as Elara's body is flung into a quieter eddy, followed by coughing, gagging. I washed up in a tangled heap of driftwood and freezing silt, vomiting river water. Every part of me shook violently, my teeth chattering so hard I thought they'd shatter. I was miles from Nightfang territory, I was sure of it. The river had spit me out in a part of the Blackwood I didn't recognize. The trees were older, denser, the air carrying a different scent, less of pack, more of wild, untamed earth. And I was not alone. Sound, a soft, deliberate footfall on wet leaves, then another. Not the heavy thump of a hybrid, but the quiet, precise step of a hunter. I tried to push myself up, my arms buckling under my weight. I looked up, water streaming from my hair into my eyes. He stood 10 feet away, leaning against a moss-covered stone. He was dressed in dark, practical gear, not pack leathers. A long, wicked-looking hunting knife was sheathed at his thigh. His hair was the color of raven feathers. His eyes a piercing, unnerving blue that seemed to see right through the dark and my terror. He held a crossbow, casually pointed at the ground, but his finger was near the trigger. The scent that came from him was clean, pine, frost, and something metallic. Human, but no human moved with that kind of silent, predatory grace. "Well," he said, his voice a low, calm baritone that cut through the sound of the river. "You're a long way from home, little wolf wife." He knew what I was, or what I was supposed to be. "Please," I choked out, the word barely a whisper. Don't hurt me." He tilted his head, studying me like a fascinating, wounded bird. "Hurt you? I just watched you throw yourself into the Gorgon to escape the Alpha of the Nightfang. Seems to me the hurting's already been done." He took a slow step forward. "What's your name?" "Elara," I whispered, too cold and terrified to lie. "Elara," he repeated, as if tasting the name. "I'm Cashin. This," he gestured vaguely at the dark forest around us, "is Greyreach, no pack land, or it was." His blue eyes flickered over my shoulder, back the way I'd come. "Your Alpha is howling up a storm. He'll cross the river by dawn, cold or not. He'll track you here." Despair washed over me, colder than the river. I had run, and I had failed. I had no strength left. Cashin seemed to reach a decision. He slung the crossbow over his shoulder and closed the distance between us in a few swift strides. He crouched down, his movements efficient and devoid of threat. Up close, he was younger than I first thought, but his eyes held an ancient weariness. "I can't go back," I pleaded, my voice breaking. "I know," he said simply. To my shock, he shrugged off his heavy, waxed jacket and wrapped it around my shaking shoulders. It held his scent pine and frost. "But this isn't a sanctuary, Elara. Greyreach is a hunting ground, and you're not the only predator out tonight." As he said it, a new sound cut through the night. Not Kieran's furious, possessive howls from miles away. This was closer. A chorus of low, chuffing growls and the skittering of claws on stone, coming from the dense thicket to the east. The sound was wrong. It wasn't the coordinated harmony of a pack. It was ragged, hungry, and unhinged. Cashin's body went rigid. His hand went to the hilt of his knife, his eyes narrowing. "Rogues," he hissed. rogue werewolves. Wolves cast out from their packs or born wild who had given in completely to the beast. They were monsters in the truest sense, driven only by base hunger and moon madness. No reason, no humanity left. The growls multiplied, surrounding us. Glints of feral, moonlit eyes appeared in the darkness between the trees. 5, 6 more, they were stalking, closing the circle. Cashin pulled me to my feet, his grip firm. "Can you run?" he demanded. I nodded, adrenaline burning through the cold numbness. "Good, head for the red cliffs due north. There's a cave system, I'll hold them off. You're human, you can't fight them." A grim, almost feral smile touched his lips. "I'm not just a human, Elara. Now run." He shoved me forward and spun, his crossbow coming up in a fluid motion. The first rogue, a mangy, slavering beast with eyes of solid silver madness, launched itself from the bushes. Sound, the sharp twang of a crossbow, a yelp of pain, then a snarling, chaotic cacophony of bestial roars and the clear ring of a steel knife meeting bone. I ran. I didn't look back. I ran through the pain, through the terror, towards a vague, dark shape of cliffs I could barely see. Cashin's sounds of battle grew fainter behind me, swallowed by the snarls of the rogues. I reached the base of the cliffs, my hands scraping on rough stone as I desperately searched for an opening. There, a darker slit in the rock. I stumbled into the cave mouth, collapsing onto the cold stone floor, sobbing for breath. The sounds of the fight had stopped. Silence, a heavy, waiting silence. Then footsteps approached the cave entrance. Slow, dragging. The scent of blood, thick and coppery, filled the air. Was it Cashin's? Or rogue blood? A figure blocked the faint moonlight at the cave mouth. It was tall, silhouetted. I couldn't see who it was. I held my breath, pressing myself back against the wall. The figure took one step inside, then slumped against the wall, sliding down to sit heavily. A low, pained groan echoed in the small space. "Cashin!" I whispered into the darkness. A wet, ragged breath was the only reply. Then a voice, strained and thick with pain, but unmistakably his, spoke. "The cave, it's not empty." My blood turned to ice. I hadn't sensed anything. I'd been too terrified. Sound, from the deep, impenetrable blackness at the rear of the cave, a slow, rhythmic sound begins. Like stone grinding on stone. Then, a low, deep exhalation, not human, not wolf, something older. And the faint, unmistakable clink of a heavy chain dragging over rock. Cashin's head lifted, his blue eyes catching a sliver of moonlight, wide with a dread that mirrored my own. "We woke it up," he breathed. And from the abyss, 2 points of smoldering, ember-red light ignited, fixing directly on us. The silence in the cave was absolute. It was a thick, living thing, pressing in on Elara's eardrums after the chaos of the river and the fight. The only sounds were the ragged duet of their breathing, hers shallow and terrified, Cashin's a pained, wet rasp, and the distant, fading drip of water from the cave's ceiling. The scent of wet stone, old blood and something else, something metallic and ancient, filled the air. Then the chain rattled. It wasn't a loud sound. It was a soft, dry scrape of heavy links shifting over stone, somewhere in the profound blackness beyond their meager circle of firelight. Elara froze, her blood turning to ice water in her veins. Cashin's hand, which had been pressed against the bleeding gashes on his side, stilled. "Scrape, drag. Don't move," Cashin breathed, the words barely audible. His eyes, reflecting the low fire, were fixed on the darkness. "Don't speak." Elara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage of bone. She followed his gaze, straining to see. The firelight danced over the rough, red rock walls of the cavern, but it died just 10 feet away, swallowed by an impenetrable gloom. The cave was far deeper than she'd realized. A low, resonant hum vibrated through the stone floor, up through the soles of her wet boots. It was a sound felt more than heard, a subsonic thrum that made her teeth ache. The air grew colder, the warmth of the fire suddenly feeble and insignificant. What is in here with us? The memory of Kieran's roar, echoing across the Gorgon River, seemed like a child's tantrum compared to this silent, waiting presence. This was not the hot, aggressive rage of a werewolf. This was something old and patient and utterly cold. Another rattle of the chain, closer this time. A shape began to coalesce in the shadows at the edge of the light. It was massive, a darker blot against the dark, hunched and unnatural. Elara saw the glint of something, a massive, tarnished metal cuff, as wide as her thigh, encircling a limb that was neither fully wolf nor man. The links of the chain, each as thick as her wrist, trailed back into the abyss. 2 points of light ignited in the darkness. Not the fiery gold of a werewolf's eyes, nor the warm brown of Cashin's. These were a pale, luminous silver, like fog-shrouded moons. They held no emotion, only a profound, unsettling focus. They were fixed on her. A voice echoed in the cavern, not through the air, but directly inside her skull. It was the sound of grinding stone and deep, still water. Human. Elara gasped, clapping her hands over her ears, but the voice was internal, inescapable. Cashin shifted, a pained groan escaping him as he tried to position his body slightly in front of hers. A gesture of protection, however futile. "She is under my protection," Cashin said aloud, his voice strained but firm. "We sought only shelter, we mean no disturbance." The silver eyes blinked slowly. The chain tightened with a groan of stressed metal. "The scent of Nightfang clings to her, the stink of a broken bond. And you, Hunter, you are not what you seem. You carry a silence within you." The entity's head tilted. Elara could now make out a silhouette, a powerful, bestial torso, but with a strangely elongated neck and a skull that seemed too angular. It was chained at the ankle and the wrist, the links buried deep in the rock wall behind it. "We will leave at first light," Cashin promised. "The Alpha will come. The river will not stop him for long. His rage is a beacon." The creature's mental voice held a hint of cold amusement. "He will tear this forest apart to reclaim his property." "I am not property," Elara whispered, the words torn from her by a surge of defiance that felt stupid and brave all at once. The silver eyes swung back to her. The pressure in her mind increased, a cold probe. She felt it skitter over the raw, aching void where her mate bond with Kieran should have been, a bond that had never fully formed, a connection that had only ever given her fear. She felt the entity pause there, examining the defect. "No, you are a key, a broken, rusted key." It shifted again, and the firelight finally caught the full sight of its face. Elara stifled a scream. It was a nightmare of fused features. A wolfish muzzle, but twisted, with patches of coarse hair and patches of smooth, grayish skin. Its teeth were too long, a jagged array of yellowed bone. But it was the eyes, those intelligent, ancient silver eyes that were the most horrifying. They held a terrible, weary knowledge. "What are you?" Elara breathed. "I am the Forgotten, the price paid for territory, the guardian of a border no one remembers." It settled back, the chains slackening slightly. "The Nightfang Alpha's grandfather chained me here, in this stone, to mark the edge of his domain. A show of power, a warning to others. The river is a barrier for wolves. I am the barrier for everything else." Cashin let out a slow, understanding breath. "A ward, a living ward. For 73 years, the creature intoned, its psychic voice dripping with a bitterness that could have poisoned the air. "Then let us pass," Cashin urged. "We are fleeing from Nightfang. We are no threat to your prison." The silver eyes narrowed. "You bring his threat to my door. His pursuit will lead him here. To me, my peace ends." The word peace was laced with such profound irony it made Elara shiver. "Therefore, a bargain." "We have nothing to bargain with," Cashin said, his body tensing. "You do." The creature's gaze pinned Elara once more. "The human, the key, she stays with me." "No." Cashin's refusal was immediate, a snarl entering his voice. He tried to stand, but his leg buckled, and he fell back with a sharp cry, fresh blood seeping through his fingers. "You are in no position to refuse, Hunter. You are wounded. The rogues will have caught your blood scent, and the Alpha comes. Leave her. She may yet live as a curiosity. You will certainly die." Elara's mind raced. The thought of being left alone with this chained horror was worse than death. But Cashin, bleeding and pale in the firelight Kieran's hybrid form, crashing through the forest, the entity was right. She was a beacon, a curse to anyone near her. "If I stay," Elara said, her voice trembling but clear, "you let him go, you ensure he gets away, and you do not harm me." The creature let out a sound that was a psychic approximation of a dry chuckle. "Terms, acceptable. The hunter leaves at dawn. You remain, my new curiosity." Cashin was shaking his head, fury and helplessness warring on his face. Elara, no, you don't know what it is. I know it's not Kieran, she said, a sudden, desperate clarity striking her. And I know you'll die if you try to carry me out of here. This isn't a choice. It's a delay. She looked at the chained entity. A temporary bargain. The silver eyes watched her, unblinking. Clever key. Dawn is in 4 hours. Rest, Hunter. Your time here dwindles. With that, the entity seemed to recede, melting back into the deeper darkness until only the faint silver glow of its eyes remained, watching, always watching. The oppressive weight in Elara's mind lessened, but did not disappear. It was a constant, cold pressure at the base of her skull. Cashin sank back against the wall, his breath hissing through his teeth. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks upward. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sounds were the crackle of the flames, Cashin's pained breathing, and the occasional soft, metallic sigh from the chains in the dark. I'm not leaving you, Cashin finally whispered, so low she almost didn't hear it. You have to, she whispered back, drawing her knees to her chest. The cold of the cave was seeping into her bones. It's the only move on the board. What did it mean, a key? He asked, his eyes searching her face. I don't know. She thought of the defective bond, of Kieran's disgusted rants about her human frailty. My whole life, I've been a lock that couldn't be opened, a mate that couldn't be bonded. Useless. Cashin was quiet for a moment. It called me a silence. Werewolves, they can usually sense each other. The hierarchy, the power, they couldn't sense me. That thing can't fully read me either. He winced as he adjusted his position. It's how I survive in Greyreach. I'm a ghost to them. But you're not human, Elara stated, recalling his speed, his strength against the rogues. No, he admitted, his gaze falling to the fire. Not entirely, not anymore. He didn't elaborate and she didn't ask. Some secrets were too heavy for words. Exhaustion, deeper than any she had ever known, pulled at her. Her eyelids grew leaden. The warmth of the fire, the relative silence, and the sheer physical and emotional depletion of the night were too much. Against her will, her head nodded forward. She dreamed. She was back in the opulent Nightfang Alpha house, but it was empty, echoing. The portrait of Kieran's grandfather, a severe man with cold eyes, stared down at her. In the dream, she walked to the massive stone fireplace. Carved into the mantel was a scene. Wolves chasing a stag through a forest. But as she looked closer, the stag transformed, its antlers becoming chains, its eyes glowing silver. One of the wolf's faces melted and reformed into Kieran's, jaws snapping at the chained creature's throat. A voice, her own but not, echoed in the hollow house. The price of power is always paid in flesh. She jerked awake with a gasp. The fire had burned lower. Cashin was awake, his eyes alert, listening to the world outside the cave. The silver eyes in the darkness were still there, watching. A new sound filtered in from the cave entrance, a distant, mournful howl that curled through the trees of Greyreach. It was answered by another, closer, more unhinged. The rogues. Then, cutting through the night, clear and furious even from miles away, came the sound they had both been dreading. A roar of pure, untamed alpha rage. It wasn't the hybrid's challenge from the riverbank. This was closer. He had crossed the Gorgon. Kieran was in Greyreach. He is swift, the entity's voice murmured in her mind, a note of clinical interest in its tone. The hunter's time is up. The first faint gray light of dawn was beginning to bleed into the cave's entrance, outlining the jagged opening in pale silver. Cashin met Elara's eyes. His were full of a storm of conflict, duty, survival, and something else, something that looked painfully like regret. I will come back for you, he vowed, the words a raw promise. He began to struggle to his feet, using the wall for support. Go now, little silence, the entity commanded. Follow the eastern cliff wall. The rogues are circling to the west, drawn by the Alpha's noise. You have a narrow path. Cashin gave a sharp nod. He took one last, long look at Elara, as if memorizing her face in the dim light. Then, limping badly, he turned and vanished into the thin morning mist at the cave's mouth, swallowed by the forest. Alone. The word echoed in Elara's soul. She was alone with the chained creature. The sound of Kieran's enraged roar came again, much closer now. She could hear the snap of branches, the crash of a body moving with reckless speed through the undergrowth. He was hunting, and he was almost here. She scrambled back until her spine pressed against the cold cave wall, as far from the entrance and the deep darkness as she could get. The entity shifted, its chains singing a low, metallic song. "Now, little key," it whispered into the heart of her mind, its silver eyes brightening in the gloom. "Let us see what the Alpha will do when he finds his treasure in the dragon's den." A shadow filled the cave entrance, blocking the dawn light. The scent of pine, fury, and powerful wolf flooded the small space. A low, vibrating growl shook the very air, a sound of possessive triumph and imminent violence. Kieran stood at the threshold, his hybrid form immense and terrifying, his golden eyes blazing as they locked onto Elara cowering against the wall. A savage smile stretched his maw, revealing sharp canines. "Found you," he rumbled, the words slurred with animalistic hunger. He took one step into the cave, and then his gaze swung past her, into the deep darkness where the silver eyes glowed. His growl cut off. His triumphant expression froze, then shattered into a mask of primal, unrecognizing fear. He took an involuntary step back. The entity's chains rattled, a deafening sound in the sudden silence. "Hello, grandson," the ancient, grinding voice echoed through the cave, this time aloud for all to hear. "Did you come for your inheritance?" The silence that followed the entity's word, grandson, was more profound than any sound. It was a vacuum, sucking the rage from the cave and leaving behind a chilling, ancestral dread. Kieran's hybrid form, a monstrous silhouette against the cave's dim entrance, went utterly still. The low growls that had been rumbling from his chest like distant thunder ceased. Elara, pressed against the cold cave wall, heard the sharp, almost imperceptible intake of his breath. It wasn't a sound of confusion, but of recognition. A memory, long buried and forbidden, clawing its way to the surface. The entity shifted, the sound of its chains a dry, skeletal rasp. "You have your grandfather's eyes," it mused, its voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "The same fury, the same fear." "You are dust," Kieran snarled, but the threat was hollow, undercut by a tremor Elara had never heard before. It wasn't the tremor of rage, but of a child confronting a nightmare from a forgotten story. A story told to frighten pups. "You do not exist." A low, grinding chuckle filled the space. "Do I not, Alaric's blood? Do these chains not exist? This cave your family's shameful little lockbox?" The air grew heavier, pressing down on Elara's lungs. "He told you I was dead. A cleaner tale. But some stains cannot be washed out with lies, grandson. They seep into the stone. They wait." Elara's eyes darted between the two. Kieran, a mountain of muscle and wrath, seemed to diminish before the chained presence. His claws, which had been extended to rend and tear, were now partially retracted. He was listening, his wolf's senses parsing the ancient, undeniable truth in the creature's scent. A scent of deep earth, old blood, and something uniquely, familiarly. "Why is she here?" Kieran demanded, his gaze slicing through the gloom to where Elara stood. The possessive heat was still there, but it was now mingled with a new, volatile caution. "The broken key," the entity said. "She is my guest." A bargain was struck, the silence for her safety. The silence is gone, she remains. Kieran took a step forward, the gravel crunching under his massive paw-like feet. "She is mine, my mate, my property, you have no claim." "Property," the entity repeated, the word dripping with disdain. "Alaric spoke the same way, of land, of power, of me, see where it got him." The chains rattled with a sudden, violent tension. "The key stays, you may leave. Or you may join me in this splendid retirement. The chains are long. There is room." Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was a stalemate between two terrifying forces, and she was the fragile prize in the center. She saw Kieran's muscles coil, the conflict playing out in the rigid line of his back. His instinct to dominate, to seize what was his, warred with a deep-seated, pack-taught fear of this thing in the dark. "What do you want with her?" Kieran's voice was a forced calm. "She is human, she is nothing to you." "Nothing." The entity seemed to find this amusing. "She is a paradox, a mate bond that sings a song of silence. A human who walks through the wolf's world, leaving a trail of questions. She is a curiosity, and I have had little to entertain me for 7 decades. The mention of the bond, of its defective silence, made Kieran flinch as if struck. His hybrid eyes, glowing with amber fury, found Elara's in the dark. In them, she saw not just anger, but a blistering shame. She was a living manifestation of his failure, his weakness, and now she was being discussed as an oddity by a family ghost. "Give her to me," Kieran commanded, summoning his alpha tone. It was a power that could force betas to their knees, that could compel obedience through sheer will. The entity laughed. It was a sound like cracking ice and shifting continents. "Your little compulsion has no purchase here, pup. This cave is my den. Your grandfather's magic, his fear, is in these chains. Your power is of the same source. It is a key that does not fit this lock." For the first time, true uncertainty flashed across Kieran's bestial features. He was an alpha who had never been denied, whose will was law. To be rendered impotent, and by this relic, was a blow to his very essence. Elara saw her chance, a sliver of space between the two titans. The cave entrance was blocked by Kieran, but the entity had said the chains were long. The cave delved deeper into blackness behind it. She had no idea what lay there, but it was away from Kieran. As if sensing her thought, the entity's attention shifted back to her. The pressure of its regard was a physical weight. "Do not stray too far, little key. The deep dark holds older things than things that are not curious. They are simply hungry." Kieran used the distraction. He moved, not toward Elara, but along the cave wall, circling, his nose working as he tried to map the space, to find a weakness in the entity's prison or a path to his mate. The scent of Cashin's blood, of Rogue, and of his own fear was a tangled web in the air. "He was here," Kieran growled, his voice dropping to a predatory register. "The hunter, the one who smells of nothing, where is he?" "The silence kept his bargain," the entity replied. "He left at dawn. Your rogues were waiting. They are not waiting anymore." There was a dark satisfaction in its tone. Kieran's snarl was instantaneous. "You let them have him." "I am not a shepherd for strays. I merely opened the gate. The wolves outside decided the rest." Elara's blood ran cold. Cashin, wounded, exhausted, thrown to the rogues. The man who had saved her, however tersely, was gone because of her bargain. A sob caught in her throat, a tiny, broken sound. Kieran's head snapped toward her. The sound of her distress, even now, called to the mate bond, a twisted thread of connection he couldn't sever. It fueled his rage. "This is your doing," he spat at the entity. "Her protector is dead. She is defenseless." "She has me," the entity said simply. The absurdity of it, the horror, almost made Elara laugh. She was now under the protection of a chained nightmare, against her own mate. The world had fully inverted. Kieran finally stopped his pacing. He stood at the very edge of the pool of faint light from the entrance, his form a cutout of darkness. "I will return," he said, and the words were a vow etched in ice. "With silver, with iron, with the whole pack. We will tear this cliff down stone by stone, and I will take what is mine." The entity was unimpressed. Promises, Alaric made them too. He found the stone unyielding. "Go, then, run back to your opulent house and your manicured lies. Tell your pack the old ghost is awake. See how they sleep tonight." With a final, searing look at Elara, a look that promised a world of pain and reclamation, Kieran turned. He melted back out of the cave entrance, his hybrid form disappearing into the blinding daylight. The immediate, overwhelming pressure of his presence lifted, leaving Elara gasping in the sudden quiet. But it was replaced by another, more ancient pressure. She was alone with it. The cave seemed to breathe in the silence. The drip of water, the rustle of its movement, the faint, eternal groan of the chains. "He will try, you know," the entity said, its voice now quieter, more conversational, and somehow more intimate. "He is Alaric's grandson. Stubborn, but predictable. He will not use silver or iron. He will try to command the pack to dig, to tear. And they will obey. But fear works slower and deeper than claws. It will eat at them from the inside before they ever lift a stone." Elara found her voice, a thin, reedy thing. "What are you?" "A memory, a lesson, a mistake." It shifted again, and she could make out a suggestion of a shape, not wholly wolf, not wholly man, something elongated and wrong in the deep shadow. Your mate's grandfather called me an abomination. He was right, but then so was he. He trapped me here, a living ward, a scarecrow to mark the edge of his territory and keep the real monsters of Greyreach at bay. Clever in a cowardly way. He said, grandson, Elara whispered, the pieces clicking into a horrifying picture. Blood is blood, little key, even when it is spilled and forgotten. My connection to your beloved Alpha is familial, a discarded branch of the family tree, one that grew too wild, too strange for his tidy garden. Elara's mind reeled. Kieran had a relative, imprisoned for decades. What crime could warrant such a fate? The question must have shown in her face. My crime was existence, the entity said, as if reading her thoughts. Perhaps it was. My nature, a wolf who could walk through dreams, a mind that could whisper to the stones. To Alaric, that was not a gift. It was a threat, so he made me a tool. And then he made me a secret. The sheer, prolonged cruelty of it stole Elara's breath. 73 years, in the dark, chained. Why not just kill you? The chains rattled softly. A living ward is stronger. Its pain, its rage, its very life force powers the barrier. Death would have released the magic. This is more efficient and more cruel. A very Nightfang solution. The way it said Nightfang, with such intimate loathing, mirrored the feeling that had festered in Elara's own heart. She had been a tool, too. A human mate, a symbol, then a discarded embarrassment. You called me a key, she said, her courage fraying. Why? The entity was silent for a long moment. The mate bond is a lock, a completion. Yours is fractured, unturned. It hums with a potential that was never realized. It is a key that could fit many locks if one only knew how to turn it, or break it properly. A cold different from the cave's chills seeped into her bones. Break it. All bonds can be broken, little key, some with distance, some with death, some... It paused, and she felt its attention like a beam of cold light. Some require a deeper magic, the kind that sleeps in places like this, the kind that remembers old ways. Before she could process this, a new sound echoed from the cave entrance, not the return of Kieran, but the cautious, padding steps of a wolf. A single wolf. A sleek gray form appeared, silhouetted against the light. It was Ronan in his wolf form. He stood at the threshold, not crossing in, his head low, his ears flicking forward, taking in the scene. Elara, terrified and shivering, and the deep, chained darkness beyond. Ronan's intelligent eyes met Elara's. There was no aggression in his gaze, only a deep, weary assessment. He sniffed the air, catching the fading scent of Kieran, the old blood, the entity's primordial odor. Beta, the entity greeted, its tone oddly formal. You are not with your Alpha. Ronan shifted. The sound of cracking bone and reforming flesh was swift, practiced. In moments, the naked, grim-faced man stood in the wolf's place. He did not look at Elara, his focus entirely on the blackness where the entity resided. He ordered the pack to muster at the Gorgon, Ronan said, his voice flat. He is raving about a ghost in the cliffs, about treason. Finally, his gaze slid to Elara. And about you. And you, the entity pressed. Do you also come to retrieve lost property? Ronan's jaw tightened. I came to see the ghost for myself. He took a single, deliberate step into the cave. I remember the stories. The forbidden tales pups tell each other. The forgotten one, the ward. You have a good memory, Beta. I have a duty to my pack, Ronan said, but it sounded like a recitation, not a conviction. His eyes were on the chains, tracing their path into the stone. This changes the territory. A living ward of that age, its magic would be woven into the land itself. Tearing it out could unravel everything. A practical man, the entity mused. Unlike your Alpha, so what is your practical solution? Ronan looked at Elara again, a long, inscrutable look. The human is the trigger. Kieran's obsession is the danger. Remove the trigger, the obsession has no focus. The pack is not put at risk for a human. Elara's breath hitched. Was he suggesting her death, here and now? You would kill her, the entity asked, echoing her thought. No, Ronan said, too quickly. He straightened, his posture that of a soldier reporting. Exile, true exile, beyond Greyreach, where Kieran cannot follow without abandoning the pack entirely, where the bond will stretch and snap from sheer distance. It was a cold, logical solution. It was also a potential death sentence, but it was not Kieran's cage. An interesting proposal, the entity said. But she is under my protection. A bargain was struck. Her safety for the silence's passage. The silence may be dead, but my word is not. Ronan's eyes narrowed. Cashin is not dead. The words hit Elara like a lightning strike. Hope, sharp and painful. The rogues did not take him, Ronan continued, his voice still devoid of emotion. I tracked them. There was a struggle, more blood, but his trail goes east, toward the mountains. He is wounded, but alive. Your bargain stands, creature. She is safe, for now. The entity seemed to ponder this. The cave hummed with a low, vibrational energy. Then my protection holds. She does not leave with you, Beta. She leaves when I am satisfied, or when the key turns. Frustration flashed across Ronan's stoic face. He was a man of action, of clear commands and clear outcomes. This nebulous, ancient game was beyond his purview. He gave a sharp, stiff nod. Then you make an enemy of the Nightfang Pack. Not just its alpha, all of us. I have been an enemy of the Nightfang Pack since before your father was born, the entity replied, a hint of weary amusement returning. Leave, Ronan. Tell your alpha his beta has seen the ghost, and that the ghost is unimpressed. Ronan held his ground for a moment longer, his gaze locking with Elara's one last time. In it, she saw not malice, but a grim acknowledgement of an impossible situation. He shifted back into his wolf form and slipped away as silently as he had come. Alone again. The entity's presence seemed to swell in the emptiness. The beta is smarter than the alpha, it said. But he is bound by chains of his own making. Duty, loyalty. They will strangle him as surely as these iron ones strangle me. Elara sank to the cold floor, her strength finally giving out. The adrenaline was gone, leaving a hollow, trembling exhaustion. Cashin was alive. Ronan had offered a path, however cold. Kieran was returning with an army. And she was a key in a prison with a forgotten monster. What do you want from me? She pleaded, her voice breaking. The chains scraped as the entity settled, as if getting comfortable. For now, little key, I want you to sleep. You are no use to anyone, least of all yourself, in this state. The deep dark is quiet. I will watch. I have nothing but time. It was not a comfort. It was a sentence. But her body obeyed, shutting down. As her eyes fluttered closed, the last thing she heard was the slow, rhythmic drip of water and the faint, whispering hum of the ancient chains, a lullaby of stone and sorrow. Just before sleep claimed her, a new sound woven into the hum reached her ears, so faint she thought she imagined it. It was a voice, but not the entity's. It was younger, strained, and coming from the deepest blackness behind the chained creature. A single, rasping word that echoed from the walls of a deeper prison. Elara. The voice was a whisper of dust and old stone, a sound that shouldn't have been a sound at all. It slithered from the absolute blackness beyond the reach of the chained entity's dim, phosphorescent glow. Elara. Every hair on her body stood on end. She jerked her head away from the forgotten one, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The entity itself went still, its massive, shadowy head tilting toward the source of the sound. The chains gave a soft, grating rattle. You hear it, the forgotten one murmured, not a question. Its voice was a low rumble of intrigue. The deep dark speaks. It rarely takes an interest. Who is that? Elara breathed, her own voice trembling. The exhaustion that had been a lead weight in her bones was now sharpened by a new, razor-fine fear. This cave was not just a prison. It was a layered tomb, and she was in the shallowest level. A relic, the entity said, its attention split between her and the abyss. Older than my imprisonment. Quieter, it sleeps, and in sleeping, it dreams. Your presence is disruptive, little key. You stir stagnant water. A soft, dry scuttling echoed from the darkness, like claws on stone. Elara shrank back against the cold cave wall, the rough rock snagging on her torn clothes. The scent of damp earth and ancient, metallic magic was now undercut by something else, a smell like ozone after a lightning strike, and beneath it, the faint, sweet decay of forgotten flowers. It knows your name, the entity observed. It pulled that from the air, from the echoes of your fear. Interesting. Make it stop, Elara pleaded, wrapping her arms around herself. The cold was inside her now, deep in her marrow. I cannot command the deep dark. the Forgotten One replied, a hint of its old arrogance returning. Our bargains do not extend there, but it cannot reach you here in my light. The chains that bind me also bind this place. This circle is contained. As if to contradict him, the whisper came again, slightly clearer, a sigh of longing. Elara, come see. What does it want? She asked, pressing her back harder into the stone. The entity was silent for a long moment, its luminous eyes studying the void. Companionship, it said finally, the word laden with a terrible understanding. It is lonely in its dreaming. And you, a human with a werewolf's mate bond etched into your soul yet fraying at the edges, you are a fascinating toy. A spark in its endless night. The thought of being a toy for something that lurked in that impenetrable blackness made her stomach lurch. She thought of Kieran, of his possessive rage. Was this any different? Just another powerful being seeing her as a thing to be claimed or used. You said you could break the bond, she said, forcing the words out, using the new fear to combat the old. You said there was deeper magic. The entity's gaze swung back to her, the glow in its eyes intensifying. Ah, the practical heart survives the storm. Yes, the magic that forged the mate bond is primal, a law of our world. But all laws have loopholes, little key. All magic has a countercurrent. It shifted, the chains groaning in protest. The bond is not a physical chain. It is a tether of spirit, of fate. To break it requires not force, but unraveling. A severing of the thread at the point where it connects to you. How? The word was a desperate gasp. Pain, the entity said simply. But not the pain of a claw or a tooth. The pain of a truth so profound it scars the soul. The bond is tied to your deepest self, to your love, your loyalty, your hope. To break it, that self must be unmade and remade. It is a death, a small one, but a death nonetheless. Elara stared, horror dawning. You're talking about destroying who I am. I am talking about freeing who you could be, it corrected, its voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The bond Kieran clings to is anchored in the Elara who loved him, who believed in the fantasy. That Elara is already dying. I can hasten the process. I can show you the truth he hides, the rot at the core of your connection. See that truth fully, accept it utterly, and the tether will snap. The scuttling from the deep dark came again, closer now. A faint, shimmering outline like heat haze appeared at the very edge of the gloom. It had no distinct shape, only a suggestion of movement, of attention. It draws closer, the Forgotten One noted, sounding almost amused. Your distress is a beacon. You must choose, Key. Stay in my light and face a truth that will break you free, or let the deep dark's curiosity grow. It offers no bargains, only absorption. Tears of frustration and terror welled in Elara's eyes. This was no choice. It was between two different kinds of annihilation. She thought of Cashin's vow to return. Would he find only an empty cave, or a woman who was no longer herself? Show me, she whispered, the sound swallowed by the cavern. Show me the truth. A slow, satisfied breath hissed from the entity. Lie down, child. Close your eyes. Do not fight the current. With no other option, Elara lowered herself to the cold, sandy floor of the cave. The rock bit into her shoulder. She squeezed her eyes shut. For a moment, there was only the sound of her own ragged breathing and the drip of distant water. Then a cold, dry touch settled on her forehead. Not a hand, something more ethereal, a pressure of will. The Forgotten One's voice filled her mind, bypassing her ears. Do not look with your eyes. See with the soul, he marked. The cave dissolved. She was in the Alpha's house, not as it was now, but as it had been on the night of the last full moon. She saw herself from outside, a ghost in her own memory. She was standing in the grand living room, wearing a simple dress, her hands clasped nervously. Kieran stood by the fireplace, his back to her, his form rigid. The air crackled with his barely contained energy. You should retire to your room, Elara. His voice was a growl, strained. Lock the door. I'm not afraid of you, Memory Elara said, her voice small but steady. Kieran turned. His eyes were molten gold, the wolf right beneath the surface. You should be, he snarled, and there was no love in it, only a fierce, frightening possession. The moon is loud tonight. It calls to the beast. And the beast does not understand your fragility. The scene shifted, blurred. Now she was seeing through Kieran's eyes. The sensation was jarring, the heightened sense, the overwhelming drive, the raw power thrumming in his veins. He was pacing the forest border, the memory Elara safe inside the house. His thoughts were not of love, but of control. A liability, his own inner voice, dark and frustrated, echoed in the shared vision. A beautiful, breakable anchor, the pack whispers. An alpha with a human mate is an alpha with a weakness. Pain lanced through Elara's spectral heart. She had felt his distance, but to hear the cold calculus of his thoughts, the memory scene changed again. She was in the pack meeting hall, hidden in the shadows. Kieran sat on his alpha's dais, Ronan at his side. A senior warrior, Garrick, was speaking. The border skirmishes with the Blood Moon pack are increasing. They sense instability, Alpha. There is no instability, Kieran's voice boomed, full of authority. With respect, Garrick pressed, his gaze flicking briefly, meaningfully, toward the wing of the house where Elara lived. A human mate cannot strengthen the bloodline. She cannot bear true heirs. She cannot feel the pack bond. Our enemies see a future, without a strong successor. Kieran's fist clenched on the arm of his throne. Rage, hot and defensive, flooded the vision. But beneath the rage, slithering and cold, was a seed of agreement. "My mate is not your concern," he growled. "My strength is, and I will prove it." The truth was a ice pick chipping at her soul. She had been a point of contention, a symbol of his defiance, but also a secret shame. He hadn't fought for her out of pure love. He had fought to prove his will could not be questioned, even by fate. "Deeper," the Forgotten One's voice urged in her mind. The vision plunged into darkness, then resolved into a new memory. This one was older, hazy at the edges. Kieran, younger, maybe a year after their mating. He was with Ronan by the Gorgon River, its cold spray misting the air. "You could let her go," Ronan said quietly, his tone neutral. "The bond is weak. She could have a life elsewhere. The pack would understand in time." Kieran stared at the raging water, his profile hard. "She is mine," he said, the words flat, absolute. "What is mine, I keep. I don't care if the bond is weak. I don't care if she is human. The moon chose her for me. That is enough. It is the principle." "The principle is costing you respect," Ronan stated. "Then I will rule through fear," Kieran roared, turning on his beta, his eyes flashing. "I am the Alpha. My word, my claim is law. If they question my mate, they question me. And I will tear the throat out of anyone who does." The vision shattered like glass. Elara gasped, her eyes flying open. She was back on the cave floor, cold sweat beading on her skin. The truth wasn't that he didn't love her, she'd suspected that. The truth was that his love had never been the point. She was a symbol, a trophy of fate's decree, a possession he would rather destroy than relinquish. The bond wasn't anchored in her heart, it was anchored in his pride. A searing, white-hot pain erupted in her chest. It felt like a vine of thorns, wrapped around her sternum, was being ripped out by the roots. She couldn't scream. She could only arch her back, a silent agony tearing through her. In her mind's eye, she saw it, a silvery, glowing tether stretching from her heart into an infinite distance. And where it connected to her, the light was fraying, blackening, dissolving into sparks of ash. The Forgotten One watched, its luminous eyes wide. "Yes, there it is!" With a final, silent snap that resonated through her entire being, the pain vanished. A hollow, echoing emptiness took its place. The constant, low-level hum of Kieran's presence in the back of her mind, a hum she hadn't even fully acknowledged until it was gone, was suddenly, utterly silent. She was untethered, unmoored, free. She lay there, panting, staring up at the cavern ceiling. She felt lighter and more terribly alone than she had ever imagined possible. "It is done," the entity said, its voice holding a note of reverence. "The defective bond is broken. You are no longer his." Before Elara could process the enormity of it, a new sound echoed through the cave system, not a whisper, but a distant, thunderous crunch of rock, followed by the unmistakable roar of a werewolf. Kieran's roar. He was back, and he was tearing his way in. The Forgotten One's head snapped toward the cave entrance. He is early and furious. It looked back at Elara, the emptiness in her eyes. The bond is severed, but he does not know it. He will still feel the claim, the rage of possession. It will be a phantom limb, and he will blame me for the amputation. The roars grew closer, mixed with the sounds of splintering stone and snarling wolves. The pack was with him. "The deep dark stirs," the entity murmured, glancing nervously toward the blackness. The shimmering haze had grown, now pulsing softly. "The violence, it is waking the dreamer." "Elara," Kieran's voice echoed, distorted by the tunnels but terrifyingly close. It was raw, unhinged. "I'm come." The Forgotten One made a decision. With a grunt of effort, it strained against its chains. One massive, shadow-wreathed arm pulled forward, and with a claw-tipped finger, it scraped a symbol into the sandy floor in front of Elara, a complex, spiraling rune that glowed faintly blue. "This circle will hide you from sight, from scent for a short time," it rasped, the effort clearly draining. "When the fighting starts, you must run, not toward the entrance." Deeper. Elara pushed herself up onto her elbows, the world swimming. Deeper, into the dark. "The dreamer is curious about you. It may grant passage or it may not. It is a better chance than Kieran's jaws." The entity's glow began to flicker like a guttering candle. "Go, now!" Another roar, so close the cave trembled. Dust sifted from the ceiling. Elara scrambled to her feet, her legs wobbly. She stepped into the rune circle. Immediately, the sounds around her muted, and the air took on a strange, blurry quality. From the tunnel leading to the entrance, a hybrid form burst into the chamber. Kieran, larger and more monstrous than she'd ever seen him, his fur matted with rock dust, his eyes pure, raging fire. Behind him, several large warrior wolves poured in, fanning out. Kieran's gaze swept the chamber, passing over Elara's circle without a flicker of recognition. It landed on the Forgotten One. "Granduncle," Kieran spat the title like a curse. "Your time as a ward is over. Give me what's mine and your end will be quick." The Forgotten One laughed, a dry, rustling sound. "She was never yours, grandson. And she is not here." Kieran snarled, taking a step forward. Then he froze, his head tilted, his nostrils flared. A look of profound, bewildered horror crossed his beastly features. He clutched at his own chest. What have you done?" he whispered, the rage bleeding into confusion and a dawning, terrifying loss. I can't feel her." The entity smiled, a ghastly sight. "You feel only an echo. The bond is broken, Kieran. She is free of you." A howl of pure, agonized denial ripped from Kieran's throat. It was not the roar of an alpha, but the wounded cry of a beast. "No, you lie." He launched himself at the chained form. Chaos erupted. Warrior wolves surged forward, claws and fangs aiming for the Forgotten One's limbs. The entity fought back with surprising strength, its shadowy form solidifying into claws and crushing force, throwing wolves against the walls. But the chains held it fast. Elara watched, hidden, her hand over her mouth. This was her chance. She looked from the violent melee at the cave entrance to the deep, pulsing darkness at the rear of the chamber. The shimmering haze was coalescing, forming a vague, arch-like shape in the blackness. An invitation, or a maw. From the tunnel, a new figure entered, moving with calm purpose. Ronan. He was in human form, a silver-tipped spear in his hand. He assessed the battle, his eyes cold. They passed over the space where Elara hid, paused for the briefest moment, and moved on. Did he see? He didn't react. Instead, he moved toward the fray, his intent clear. End the Forgotten One and clean up the mess. It was now or never. Stepping out of the rune circle, the world of sound and scent crashed back in the snarls, the howls of pain, the coppery tang of blood. She took one last look at the chamber, Kieran, a whirlwind of grief and fury, tearing at the entity. Ronan raising his spear for a precise strike. She turned and ran, not toward the sun, into the dark. The temperature dropped instantly. The sounds of battle became muffled, then distant, as if she were running underwater. The faint, phosphorescent glow from the chamber behind her faded, leaving only the eerie, pulsing light from the haze ahead. It illuminated a narrow, smooth-walled tunnel that sloped sharply downward. The voice returned, no longer a whisper, but a resonant, humming vibration in the stone. "Elara, you are unmade, you are interesting, come be part of the dream." She ran, her breath sobbing in her lungs, her bare feet slipping on the damp stone. The tunnel curved, and the last glimpse of light from the chamber vanished. She was in utter blackness, guided only by the soft, pulsing glow that now emanated from the walls themselves, revealing ancient, carved runes she didn't recognize. The slope leveled out. The tunnel opened into a vast, subterranean cavern. It was not dark. The entire cavern was lit by a bioluminescent fungus that coated the walls and ceiling in webs of soft blue and green light. In the center of the cavern stood a still, black pool, its surface like polished obsidian. And sitting at the edge of the pool, her back to Elara, was a woman. She wore tattered robes that might have been white once, now gray with age. Her long hair was the color of moonlight on snow. She was humming the same tune that had been a whisper, a vibration. The woman turned. Elara stifled a scream. The face was beautiful, ageless, and utterly empty. The eyes were solid pools of the same black as the pool, reflecting no light. She smiled, and it was a gentle, horrifying thing. "Hello, Elara," the woman said, her voice the sound of a glass harmonica, sweet and chilling. "I am the dreamer. You have broken your chain. Would you like to see what happens next?" Before Elara could move, the woman gestured with a pale hand toward the black pool. The surface rippled, then cleared, becoming a window. In it, Elara saw the cave chamber above. She saw Ronan's silver spear pierce the Forgotten One's shadowy heart. She saw the entity dissolve into wisps of darkness and a final, sighing breath. She saw Kieran, standing amidst the carnage, howling her name into the emptiness, his face a mask of utter devastation. Then the image in the pool changed. It showed the forest outside. It showed Cashin, his arm bandaged, moving with lethal grace through the trees, a fierce, determined set to his jaw. He was heading for the cave. He was almost there. The dreamer smiled her empty smile. The hunter returns for his lost ward. The Alpha mourns his lost prize. And you, little broken key, are here with me. She extended a hand. Stay, dream with me. I will show you all their ends. I will show you your own. The pool's image shifted one final time. It showed Elara herself, standing right here, but her eyes were as black and empty as the dreamer's. "This," the dreamer whispered, "is one possible future. The quiet one, the painless one. All you have to do is take my hand." From the tunnel behind her, Elara heard the faintest echo of Cashin's voice, calling her name, full of urgency and fear. She stood at the edge of the glowing cavern, the empty-eyed dreamer waiting, the black pool showing her a terrible, serene fate, and the fading sound of a rescue that might already be too late. The echo of Cashin's voice was a lifeline, frayed and distant, but real. It cut through the hypnotic hum of the cavern, through the seductive, whispering silence of the dreamer's offer. Painless. The word hung in the luminous air, a promise and a threat. Elara tore her gaze from the still, black pool, its surface now showing only the reflection of the glowing fungi and her own pale, terrified face. The vision of Kieran's shattered howl, of Ronan's cold efficiency, of Cashin fighting his way through the dark. They were gone, swallowed by the pool's darkness. But they were real. They were now. The dreamer watched her, its head tilted with an avian curiosity. Its empty black eyes held no malice, only a vast, yawning hunger for quiet, for an end to the noisy, painful struggle of being. "He calls you," the dreamer whispered, its voice the sound of dust settling on forgotten stones. "A small sound, a fleeting pain. Here there is no call, no loss, only the dream." Another shout, clearer this time. "Elara!" Cashin's voice was strained, edged with a desperation that was utterly, beautifully human. It was the sound of a fight, of effort, of someone choosing to struggle for her. That sound was the opposite of this place. Her body ached with a profound new emptiness where the mate bond had been. It wasn't just a physical hollow. It was the absence of a fundamental rhythm she'd lived with for years, a heartbeat suddenly silenced. But in that silence, there was space. Space not for the dreamer's nothingness, but for her own breath, her own choice. "No," Elara said. The word was a croak, but it grew stronger. "No, I don't want your dream." The dreamer's expression did not change, but the air in the cavern did. The gentle, inviting hum deepened into a low, subaudible thrum that vibrated in Elara's teeth and bones. The bioluminescent light seemed to pulse, not with life, but with a slow, predatory rhythm. "All things come to the dream in time," the entity murmured. It took a step forward, not with a footfall but with a soft, scraping sound, as if its form was displacing centuries of dust. Your pain is a beacon. Your unmade self is a door. You have already stepped inside. The sense of pressure returned, not on her skin but on her mind. It was a gentle, insistent push, like deep water urging her to let go and sink. Images, not visions of the past or future, but of pure sensation, bloomed behind her eyes. The weightlessness of sleep without dreams, the sweet silence of a snow-blanketed forest, the dissolution of fear, of memory, of Elara. It was so terribly tempting. Elara? Cashin's voice was closer, maybe at the mouth of the tunnel leading down into this chamber. A scuffle of boots on stone, a grunt of effort. The dreamer's attention flickered for a fraction of a second toward the sound. The mental pressure eased just a hair. It was enough. Elara turned and ran, not with the frantic, blind terror of her flight from Kieran, but with a desperate, focused clarity. She sprinted away from the black pool, away from the ageless woman, toward the rough-hewn tunnel she'd descended. The glowing moss provided just enough light to see the uneven floor, the jagged walls. A sigh followed her, a sound of profound disappointment that seemed to emanate from the very walls. You run toward the pain. How curious. The thrumming in the air intensified. The glowing fungi along her path began to dim, one by one, as if snuffed out by an unseen breath, plunging sections of the tunnel into near-total darkness. Behind her, Elara heard not footsteps, but a soft, relentless shushing sound, like a sheet being dragged over stone. It was getting closer. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the cavern's oppressive drone. She stumbled on a loose rock, her palms scraping against the rough wall. The darkness ahead was now almost complete. Then a flicker of torchlight danced on the tunnel walls ahead. "Cashin!" she screamed, her voice raw. The light surged forward, and there he was, framed in the tunnel entrance, a silhouette holding a burning torch aloft. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat, his eyes wide with alarm. Behind him, the upper cave was a chaos of scattered stones, and the still, dark form of the Forgotten One. "Down here," he yelled, his voice cutting through the dreamer's psychic hum. He saw her, and his expression shifted from fear to fierce determination. "Run, now!" The shushing sound was right behind her, cold air brushing the nape of her neck. Elara pushed her burning muscles one more time, lunging the last few yards toward the light. Cashin didn't hesitate. As she stumbled into the circle of torchlight, he grabbed her arm, his grip iron-strong, and yanked her behind him. He thrust the torch toward the tunnel mouth, not at anything physical, but into the encroaching, soundless darkness that seemed to pour from it. The flame guttered and spat, as if fighting a windless gale. A high, thin wail, felt more than heard, echoed from the depths. The darkness recoiled just for a moment, repelled by the fire's chaotic, living energy. "Out!" Cashin commanded, shoving her toward the cave's main entrance, now just a slash of gray pre-dawn light against the dark rock. They burst out of the cave mouth and into the cold, clean air of Greyreach. The sky was the color of bruised flesh, the first true hints of dawn bleeding into the east. Cashin didn't stop. He kept running, pulling her along, putting distance between them and the red cliff face, until they stumbled into the cover of the ancient, dense trees. Only then did he slow, releasing her arm to brace his hands on his knees, sucking in great, ragged gulps of air. Elara collapsed against a thick pine, her legs giving way, her own breath sobbing in her throat. She looked back at the cave. It sat silent, innocuous. No darkness poured forth, no sound emerged, but the feeling of that yawning, hungry emptiness lingered in her soul like a frost. After a long moment, Cashin straightened. He looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her from head to toe, assessing for injury. His eyes lingered on her face, searching for something. "You're alive," he said, the words a statement of profound relief. "It's gone," she whispered, the truth of it finally hitting her fully. She pressed a hand to her chest. "The bond, it's really gone. I saw him feel it break." Cashin's jaw tightened. "I felt it too, a ripple in the world. Then I heard Kieran's howl." He glanced back toward the direction of the Gorgon River, his expression grim. It wasn't a sound of anger, it was grief, raw, shattered grief. That's more dangerous. The Forgotten One? Elara asked, though she already knew, the memory of Ronan's swift, brutal strike flashing in her mind. Dead by the beta's hand. Cashin's voice was flat. Kieran was incapacitated by the loss of the bond. Ronan did what was necessary to get his Alpha out of there. They're gone, back across the river. Elara absorbed this. Ronan, ever the pragmatist, cleaning up the mess. Kieran brought to his knees not by a rival, but by an absence. The ancient entity, a secret and a shield, extinguished. So much death and pain, and she was at the center of it all. The thing in the deepy, the dreamer, she said, her voice trembling. It wanted me to stay, to forget. Cashin's gaze sharpened. The old stories say the deepest places in Greyreach dream their own dreams, that they sometimes dream things awake. He shook his head, a shiver that was not from the cold running through him. You are free of the bond, Elara, but you are not safe. Kieran's grief will curdle. It will become a new kind of obsession. And Ronan will see you as the source of all this instability. They will come for you again. Not for a mate, but for a ghost that haunts their Alpha. The weight of his words settled over her. Freedom, it seemed, was just another form of wilderness. What do I do? The question was barely audible. Cashin was silent for a long time, studying the waking forest. Finally, he spoke. The living ward is broken. The magical border it maintained is gone. Greyreach is unstable. The rogues will be emboldened. Other things, older things, might stir. He looked at her, his decision clear in his eyes. You can't stay here, and you can't go back to the human world, not yet. He'd find you. The pack has networks, eyes everywhere. Then where? Despair threatened to swallow her. North, Cashin said, his voice firming with resolve. Beyond the Greyreach into the Frostfang range, there are places they're not even packs claim, shadows even werewolves avoid. I know it a sanctuary, of sorts. A sanctuary, Elara echoed, hope flickering weakly. A haven for those who don't belong anywhere else, he said, choosing his words carefully. It's not safe, but it's hidden, and it has its own rules, its own protector. He finally met her eyes fully. I will take you there. It's the only path left. The offer was a lifeline, but she looked at him, this hunter, this man who was not just a man, who had fought rogues and faced down ancient entities for a stranger. Why? She asked. Why are you doing this? You don't owe me anything. Cashin's expression grew shuttered, a veil falling behind his eyes. Let's just say I have a deep-seated distaste for alphas who believe their will is law, he said, his voice low and edged with a personal bitterness. And for things that prey on the helpless. Now we need to move. Dawn is here, it won't hide us. He offered his hand. Elara looked from his hand to his face, to the dark cave behind them, to the vast, terrifying world ahead. She had no bond, no pack, no home. All she had was a hollow space inside her and a choice. She placed her hand in his. His grip was warm, calloused, and solid, real. Okay, she said. They moved swiftly and silently, Cashin leading with an unerring sense of direction. He avoided open ground, sticking to the thickest parts of the forest, his senses alert for any sign of pursuit, from the Nightfang pack, from rogues, or from something else. The forest changed as they traveled north. The pines grew taller, the air sharper and colder. The scent of damp earth and pine needles began to carry a faint, metallic edge of frost. Elara's body, pushed far beyond its limits, operated on sheer adrenaline and will. The emptiness inside was a constant ache, a phantom limb that made her feel off balance. But with every step away from the cave, from the river, from Kieran, a strange new feeling began to whisper in that hollow space. It wasn't peace. It wasn't happiness. It was possibility. Hours passed. The sun climbed but did little to warm the deep woods. Cashin called a brief halt by a frozen stream, letting her drink the bitingly cold water and chew on a strip of tough, smoked meat he produced from his pack. We'll cross into the foothills by nightfall, he said, his eyes constantly scanning the trees. The terrain gets harder, the rules change. Rules? Elara asked between sips of water. The Frostfangs aren't just mountains, he said quietly. They're old. They have moods. Some valleys are safe in sunlight but death at night. Some passes only appear under a new moon. The sanctuary lies in one of those places. A howl echoed in the far distance from the south. It was long, tortured, and full of a rage that had been forged in loss. It was not the howl of a hunt, but of a lament that promised vengeance. Kieran, Cashin, and Elara froze, listening. The sound died away, but its message was clear. "He's not giving up," Elara whispered, cold dread seeping through her. "He can't," Cashin said grimly. "The bond is broken, but the obsession remains. To him, you're a part of himself that's been torn away. He'll want to retrieve you or destroy you. Either way, he'll keep coming." He stood, offering her a hand up. "We need to be in the mountains before dark. It's our only advantage." The pace he set was brutal. Elara's human endurance was flagging, her breaths coming in sharp, white puffs in the cold air. Just as the light began to seriously fail, painting the sky in shades of violet and charcoal, they reached the tree line. Before them stretched a vast, rocky slope leading up to sheer, snow-capped peaks that clawed at the sky, the Frostfang Range. The air was thin and biting. There, Cashin pointed to a narrow, shadowed defile between two towering cliffs. It looked like a crack in the world, dark and uninviting. "The Pass of Whispers. It leads to the valley where the sanctuary is." As they approached the pass, the temperature dropped sharply. The wind, which had been a murmur in the trees, became a voice, sighing and moaning through the rocky crevices. It did sound like whispers, hushed, ancient, and utterly incomprehensible. Cashin paused at the very entrance, a natural stone arch worn smooth by eons of wind. He turned to her, his face serious in the fading light. "Once we enter, we do not speak unless absolutely necessary. The pass listens. It repeats. Sound can attract attention. Keep your eyes forward. No matter what you hear, no matter what you think you see beside you, you look straight ahead and you keep walking. Do you understand?" Elara nodded, her throat tight with a new kind of fear. "Stay close," he said, and stepped into the shadow of the pass. The darkness within was immediate and profound. The whispering wind grew louder, forming almost words that slithered against Elara's ears. "Lost, found, key broken, come stay." The rock underfoot was smooth and uneven. Cashin's form was a faint, moving shadow ahead of her. They walked for what felt like an eternity in the near dark. The whispers swirled, sometimes sounding like her own thoughts, sometimes like Kieran's voice calling her name in anguish, sometimes like the serene, empty voice of the dreamer. She clenched her jaw, fixing her eyes on Cashin's back. Then she heard it. Not a whisper, but a clear, familiar voice, warm and close, right beside her left ear. "Elara, sweetheart, it's me. You're safe now. Look at me." It was her mother's voice. Her mother who had died 5 years ago. The voice was perfect, laden with love and concern. Her breath hitched. Her eyes, against all instinct, began to drift to the side. A hand clamped over her eyes from behind, rough and warm. Cashin's voice, real and present, growled softly by her right ear. "Forward." He kept his hand over her eyes, guiding her blindly for several steps. The illusion of her mother's voice faded into the general mournful whisper of the wind. He removed his hand. "Almost through," he murmured, his own voice strained. Up ahead, a pinprick of light appeared, not daylight, but a soft, silvery glow. The pass was ending. Relief flooded Elara's system. They emerged into a hidden valley. It was bathed in the light of a full moon that hung, impossibly large and bright, in a clear, star-strewn sky, though it had been a waning crescent just the night before. The air was still and silent, the whispering wind gone. Before them lay a forest of silver-barked trees with pale, luminous leaves. And in the center of the valley, on the shore of a perfectly still lake that reflected the giant moon, stood a structure. It was not a cabin or a fortress. It looked like a grand, old lodge built of dark timber and stone, but it was subtly wrong. Its angles seemed to shift if she stared too long, and lights flickered in its many windows not with the steady glow of fire or electricity, but with a slow, rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat. "The sanctuary of the unbound," Cashin said, his voice full of a weary reverence. "We made it." As they stood there, a figure detached itself from the shadows of the silver trees and walked toward them across the moonlit meadow. It was a woman, tall and graceful, with hair the color of winter frost and eyes that held the same ancient, knowing light as the moon above. She moved with an unnatural silence. She stopped a few yards away, her gaze sweeping over Cashin and then settling on Elara with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. "Cashin," the woman said, her voice melodic and cool. "You bring a guest to our quiet door, one who smells of severed bonds and ancient dreams." Her moonbright eyes narrowed slightly. "And of a Nightfang Alpha's furious grief." Cashin bowed his head, a gesture of deep respect. "Lysandra, she seeks sanctuary." Lysandra's gaze remained locked on Elara. "Sanctuary is not given, it is earned. And it always has a price." She took a step closer, and the scent of frost and night-blooming flowers washed over Elara. "What is your name, child of broken ties?" "Elara," she whispered, unable to look away. "Elara," Lysandra repeated, as if tasting the name. "You have left a wound in the world where your bond used to be. Such wounds have a gravity, they pull things in." She looked past them, back toward the pass of whispers, her expression turning sharp. "They are pulled even now." Elara and Cashin turned. Standing at the mouth of the pass, backlit by the strange moonlight, was a massive, silhouetted figure in hybrid form. It was not Kieran. Its fur was matted and dark, its posture one of feral, single-minded intent. It lifted its head, scenting the air, and a low, hungry growl rumbled across the silent valley. Behind it, in the dark cleft of the pass, several pairs of gleaming, feral eyes blinked into existence. The rogues they had followed, and they had found the way in. Lysandra did not look surprised. She sighed, a sound of mild inconvenience. "It seems," she said, her cool voice cutting through the sudden tension, "your first payment for sanctuary is due, Cashin. The quiet of our valley has been broken. Clean up your mess." She turned and began walking back toward the pulsating lodge, as if dismissing a minor nuisance. Cashin's body tensed, a low snarl building in his own throat. But it was a different sound than the rogues, deeper, more controlled, layered with a power Elara had only glimpsed before. The lead rogue took a step into the moonlit valley, its jaws dripping saliva. And high above, from the direction of the pass, a new howl tore through the night. This one was not grief-stricken. It was pure, unadulterated, pack-coordinated fury. It was answered by others, closer than they should be. The Nightfang pack had crossed into Greyreach. They were in the mountains, and they were coming. The new howls that tore through the pristine silence of the sanctuary valley were not the ragged, hungry cries of the rogues. These were clean, sharp, and disciplined. A hunting chorus. They echoed off the surrounding peaks, a symphony of pursuit that turned the air to ice in Elara's lungs. Nightfang. Cashin went rigid beside her, his hand tightening on the hilt of his knife. His eyes, fixed on the valley entrance where the rogues still snarled, narrowed with a ferocious calculation. "He didn't retreat far," Cashin growled, the words barely audible. "He circled. Ronan must have convinced him to track us instead of mourning." Lysandra, the keeper of the sanctuary, did not look surprised. She stood like a statue carved from moonlight and shadow, her ageless gaze sweeping from the rogues to the unseen source of the new howls. "You bring a war to my doorstep, little bird," she said, her voice still that unsettling melody. "The price of sanctuary just increased." "What price?" Elara demanded, fear making her voice sharp. Behind the rogues, between the narrow stone walls of the pass, she could see dark, powerful shapes flowing like liquid shadow. The Nightfang warriors, led by their Alpha. "Survival," Lysandra said simply. She turned her black eyes fully on Cashin. "You will hold the gate. The stone will not suffer the corrupted to enter. The pack wolves are your concern. The rogues are mine." She raised a hand, and the very air of the valley seemed to hum in response. The bioluminescent moss on the rocks pulsed brighter. "This ground is hallowed. Their rage is a stain upon it." As if her words were a signal, the lead rogue, a massive, brindled beast with eyes like cracked amber, lunged forward, crossing the invisible threshold of the valley. The moment its paws touched the moonlit grass, the ground itself reacted. Pale, root-like tendrils of pure light erupted from the soil, wrapping around its legs with shocking speed. The rogue yelped, a sound of surprise more than pain, and thrashed. Where the light touched its matted fur, thin wisps of dark smoke curled upward, carrying the scent of ozone and decay. The other rogues hesitated, snarling in confusion. Lysandra took a step forward, and her form seemed to blur at the edges. "This is not your hunting ground," she intoned, and her voice was no longer just in Elara's ears. It was in the wind, in the shudder of the mountain. "Be gone." The trapped rogue howled, this time in genuine agony, as the light tendrils tightened. With a sound like tearing parchment, they dissolved, and the beast scrambled back, its hind leg now withered and useless. The pack retreated a few paces, cowed but not defeated, their hunger warring with this new, inexplicable threat. But the distraction had cost them, and it had given the Nightfang pack the opening they needed. From the mouth of the Pass of Whispers, Kieran emerged. He was in his hybrid form, a towering monument of fury and grief. His silver fur was matted with river mud and dried blood, not his own. His eyes, those once familiar amber pools, were now shattered topaz, blazing with a madness that had nothing to do with the moon. He didn't even glance at the cowering rogues. His gaze, a physical weight, locked onto Elara. She felt it, or rather, she felt the absence of it. The bond was gone, a severed nerve, but the memory of its connection made his focus feel like a brand. There was no pull, only a terrifying, hollow recognition. Elara. Her name was a guttural rasp, torn from a ruined throat. It wasn't a call, it was a verdict. Behind him, Ronan and 4 other senior warriors fanned out. Ronan's expression was grim, his eyes scanning the valley, Lysandra, Cashin, assessing the battlefield with cold precision. He saw the rogues, the strange light, the shifting lodge. His jaw tightened. "Alpha," Ronan said, his voice low but carrying. "This place is—" "I don't care," Kieran snarled, taking a step forward. His claws dug into the earth. "She's mine. That thing," he jerked his head toward Cashin, "has stolen what is mine." Cashin moved, placing himself squarely between Kieran and Elara. He didn't draw another weapon. He simply stood. "She was never yours to own, Kieran. She was a person you chose to discard. The bond is broken. You feel it. It's over." The words were a spark in a powder keg. Kieran's roar shook snow from the higher cliffs. "You did this." He took another step, and now his paws were at the very edge of the valley's grass. "You and that abomination in the cave. You think breaking a thread severs the claim. She is my mate." "She was," Ronan interjected, his voice cutting through Kieran's rage. He remained just outside the valley, a study in contained tension. "Alpha, listen, the bond is gone. What you feel is obsession, not destiny. Look at this place." He gestured to the impossible full moon, the glowing moss, the silent, watching Lysandra. "Forcing a fight here is suicide. The rogues are still here. The magic is hostile. We retrieve her by strategy, not brute force. You counsel retreat again, Beta." Kieran whirled on him, spittle flying. "You who put a spear through my own blood." "I counsel not dying for a ghost of a bond," Ronan shot back, a crack in his icy facade. "The female is a trigger for your instability. The pack is vulnerable. My duty is to the pack's survival, not to your grief." The division between Alpha and Beta hung in the air, palpable and dangerous. The Nightfang warriors shifted uneasily. It was the opening the rogues needed. Confused by the magic but driven by relentless hunger, seeing the larger, stronger pack distracted, they attacked. Not as a coordinated force, but as a desperate feral wave. They surged not into the valley but sideways, toward the Nightfang flank. Chaos erupted. Snarls, howls, and the sickening crunch of bodies colliding filled the pass entrance. A rogue launched itself at a Nightfang warrior, jaws clamping on his shoulder. Kieran, with a wrathful bellow, turned and swatted the rogue away, its ribs cracking like dry wood. Ronan was a blur of motion, his own hybrid form emerging in a ripple of pain and power as he met 2 rogues at once. Lysandra watched, impassive. "The corrupted cleanse themselves," she murmured. Cashin saw his moment. "Elara inside the sanctuary, now." He grabbed her arm, but his eyes were on the melee. "No," Elara said, the word quiet but firm. She pulled her arm back. The terror was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but beneath it, a new certainty was hardening. Running had brought them here. Running had put Cashin in this fight. Running had led Kieran to this sacred place with violence in his heart. She was tired of being the trigger, the prize, the wound. She looked at Lysandra. "You said I had to earn sanctuary. What is the price?" "Truly," Lysandra's head tilted. An end to the chase. You are a loose thread, little bird. You must either be woven back into a pattern or you must be cut. To stay here, you must relinquish the world that chases you. You must become unmappable. It will change you. Elara, don't, Cashin began, but a roar cut him off. Kieran had broken from the skirmish. He disemboweled one rogue and shaken off another. Blood, black in the moonlight, streaked his chest. His eyes were wholly feral now, the man buried under the beast's pain. He charged, not at the rogues but straight for the valley, for Elara. As he crossed onto the moonlit grass, the valley's magic reacted. The same pale tendrils of light shot up, aiming to entangle him. But Kieran was an alpha, and his will was a tangible force. He burned with a power that was his own, not borrowed from this place. The tendrils writhed around his legs, smoking where they touched, but they could not hold him. He slowed, but he did not stop, each step a monumental effort of defiance against the ancient wards. You will not have her, he bellowed, each word a hammer blow. Cashin met the charge. He didn't transform into some hidden beast. He moved with the preternatural speed and grace he'd always shown, a shadow against Kieran's lightning. As Kieran broke the last of the light bonds, Cashin was there. He ducked under a swipe of claws that could have decapitated him and drove his knife, not for a killing blow, but deep into the muscle of Kieran's thigh. Kieran roared in pain and backhanded Cashin with terrifying force. Elara heard the crack of bone. Cashin flew through the air and landed in a heap 10 feet away, not moving. Cashin! Elara screamed. Kieran limped forward, pulling the knife from his leg and casting it aside. He was within 20 feet of her. His breath came in ragged, steaming clouds. See, he panted, the madness in his eyes tinged with a grotesque triumph. See what happens to those who try to take you from me. Now, come home. Elara stood her ground. She looked from Cashin's still form to Lysandra's waiting silence, to Ronan who was now fighting his way toward them, his face a mask of furious urgency. She looked at Kieran, her mate, her tormentor, a king of ruins. I have no home with you, she said, her voice carrying a strange calm over the distant sounds of battle. You were my home, and you made it a cage. The bond is gone, Kieran. What you're feeling is just echo. And pride. It is everything, he thundered, taking another lurching step. The valley's magic seemed to recoil from his raw, bleeding aura. You are everything. Then you have nothing, she whispered. She closed her eyes, not in surrender but in focus. She thought of the dreamer's offer, a painless end, absorption into a quiet dream. She thought of the Forgotten One's words about deeper magic and bonds that could be broken. She was human. She had no magic, but she had a will, and she had a choice. She turned to Lysandra. I'll pay the price, make me unmappable, cut the thread. A faint, almost sad smile touched Lysandra's lips. It is not I who cuts it, child. It is you. You must let go of the map they made for you. Even the memory of it. It will hurt. Do it, Elara said. Lysandra raised both hands. The full moon above seemed to brighten, pouring its light down onto Elara like a liquid silver waterfall. Elara gasped. It wasn't cold. It was a searing, unmaking heat. It didn't touch her skin. It passed through it, scouring the inside of her soul. In her mind's eye, she saw it. The mate bond, not as a thread, but as a gilded chain, shattered but still clinging with 1,000 tiny, hooked fragments embedded in her spirit. Each fragment was a memory. Kieran's first smile that wasn't a sneer, the warmth of his hand, the empty promise of protection, the terror of the full moon, the sound of him calling her defective. The moonlight was a solvent. It touched each fragment and it dissolved. Not with a snap, but with a quiet, relentless hiss. Each dissolution was a loss, a small death. She was not just severing from Kieran. She was erasing the part of herself that had been shaped by him. The hope, the fear, the love, the hate, all of it, washed away in that silent, silver fire. She screamed. It was a sound of pure, agonizing release. Kieran, who had been staggering toward her, froze. His roar of rage cut off into a choked, wounded gasp. He clutched his chest, his eyes wide with a new, incomprehensible horror. The last faint echo of the bond, the phantom limb he'd been clinging to, vanished. Not broken, erased. It was a void where a star had been. He fell to his knees, not from his wound, but from the utter, absolute emptiness that flooded in. No, 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 no. It was a whimper, the sound of a lost pup. Ronan finally reached them, breathing heavily, his own wounds ignored. He saw his Alpha on his knees, broken. He saw Elara enveloped in column of impossible moonlight, her face a rictus of agony and ecstasy. He saw Lysandra, the conduit, her expression one of solemn purpose. He understood. The problem was solving itself. The rogues, decimated by the combined efforts of the pack and the valley's magic, were fleeing, their whimpers fading into the pass. The battle was over. The moonlight faded. Elara collapsed. The grass felt impossibly soft beneath her. She was empty, scoured clean. She felt light, and unknown even to herself. Cashin stirred, pushing himself up with a grimace, one arm hanging uselessly. He crawled to her side. Elara. She opened her eyes. They were the same color, but they seemed quieter, deeper. I'm here, she said, and her voice was her own, yet not. It held no tremor of fear for Kieran. It held nothing for him at all. Kieran stared at her from his knees. He searched her face, his own a landscape of devastation. He was looking for a flicker, a hint, a reflection of the bond that had defined his existence. He found nothing, not anger, not pity. A calm, vast indifference. What have you done? He breathed. I've gone where you can't follow, she said, sitting up with Cashin's help. She looked at Lysandra. Is it done? Lysandra nodded. You are unbound. To him, to your past, to the map of that life. You are a blank page in a closed book. He will never find you by the bond again. Your scent will change. To those who knew you, you will fade like a forgotten dream. Ronan stepped forward, placing a hand on Kieran's heaving shoulder. Alpha, it is over. Kieran shook the hand off, but he didn't get up. The fight had left him. All that remained was a hollow shell, gaping at the void where his mate had been. Ronan looked at Elara, then at Cashin. There was no warmth in his gaze, but the cold hostility was gone, replaced by a weary acknowledgement. The pack will withdraw. We have much to attend to. He meant his broken Alpha. He meant the pack's survival without its driving force. He meant the burial of secrets, now truly dead. He hauled Kieran to his feet. Kieran didn't resist. He allowed himself to be turned, his eyes leaving Elara for the last time, seeing only a stranger in the moonlight. The Nightfang pack melted back into the pass of whispers, carrying their broken king. Silence returned to the valley, deeper than before. The moon overhead began to soften, shifting, until it matched the waning crescent of the true sky outside. Cashin helped Elara stand. His arm was broken, his face bruised, but his eyes were clear. The price, he said, looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. I'm still me, Elara said, though she wasn't entirely sure it was true. The core was there, but the edges were new, unwritten. She felt a profound peace, and beneath it a vast, uncharted freedom. Just free. Lysandra approached. The sanctuary is yours for as long as you wish. You have paid. The chase is ended. She looked at Cashin. Your wounds will be tended. You may stay hunter if you choose, or go. The path is open. Cashin looked at Elara, a question in his eyes that had nothing to do with bonds or magic. Elara reached out and took his good hand. It was a choice, a first mark on a blank page. The touch was warm, real, unburdened by destiny or decree. Stay, she said. He nodded, a slow, sure gesture. I'll stay. Together, they turned their backs on the pass, on the past, on the maps that had once defined them. Before them, the sanctuary of the unbound pulsed gently, its architecture settling into a form that promised rest, and perhaps, in time, a new kind of belonging. They walked toward it, not as protector and ward, not as hunter and prey, but as two unbound souls, stepping into the quiet, waiting unknown. The wind sighed through the Frostfang range, carrying away the last echoes of howls, and leaving only the deep, enduring silence of the mountains and the soft, resilient sound of two hearts, beating freely in the dark.